Christmas Eve. The house smelled like baked ham and burnt sugar cookies, the kind my wife used to overcook and insist were just golden. The tree flickered in the corner of the living room light, reflecting off silver ornaments I recognized from my old house, the same ones I'd boxed up when I gave everything to help my son start over. My granddaughter was in the den giggling at something on her tablet. I was folding the last cloth napkin, trying to make the table look decent. My hands were slow now, arthritic, but I still remembered how my wife used to fold them into perfect little fans. That's when I heard it. "You know we wouldn't be struggling so much if your father-in-law hadn't moved in. He's a burden to this family." The words didn't land right away. They hung in the air like smoke. I stayed perfectly still in the hallway, one hand still smoothing the edge of a napkin, like if I moved too fast, the floor might give out beneath me. My daughter-in-law's voice was low, irritated. She didn't know I was there, but my son did. He was standing right next to her, holding his phone, not saying a word, not looking at her, not looking at me. She kept going. "It's been 2 years, James. 2. He doesn't pay rent, he barely helps around here, and I'm tired of pretending we can afford to keep taking care of him. Your daughter's outgrowing her clothes, and we're eating boxed mac and cheese 3 nights a week. At some point, it's not cruel, it's realistic." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Keep your voice down." That was it. Not, "Don't talk about my father like that." Not, "He gave us everything. Just keep your voice down." And in that moment, something cracked. Not loud, not dramatic. More like the soft, splitting sound of old leather, a slow tear in something long worn and already frayed. I stepped back from the hallway and sat down at the far end of the dining room table. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just sat there surrounded by flickering lights and the scent of cinnamon potpourri. My hands rested in my lap. There was no room for anger. No words would have come even if I'd tried. The hurt was too big to fit through my mouth. I looked around that room, the table I had bought for them when their baby was born, the chairs from my old house, the set of Christmas china that had once belonged to my wife's mother. It was all mine, and yet I felt like a stranger trespassing in someone else's life. My granddaughter came bouncing into the room, tablet still in hand. She looked at me and grinned. "Papa, guess what I just saw?" But her mom called her back before she could finish. "Come help me with the serving spoons, sweetie." The little girl blinked, looked between us, then vanished into the kitchen. I stayed seated, staring at the white candle in the centerpiece. It was crooked. Dinner passed in silence. My son passed me the potatoes like I was a guest. His wife never met my eyes. My granddaughter leaned on her mother's arm instead of mine. I barely touched my plate. I didn't have the appetite for pleasantries. After the meal, as they were clearing plates, my daughter-in-law laughed at something on her phone and muttered, "This is why I need wine." Then she glanced at me and smiled. Not a real smile, but the kind you give to someone you wish wasn't there. I stood up, put on my coat, and walked outside. The cold hit my face like a slap. I didn't take my gloves. I didn't care. I stood on the porch and watched as lights from the neighbors' houses blinked in soft colors. Families inside warm and together. Laughter spilling out behind closed windows. I could almost hear the sound of my own house 10 years ago, the way my wife used to sing along to the Christmas records, the way James would sneak icing off cookies when he thought no one was looking. We had love then. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And now, I was a burden. I walked to the edge of the driveway, gravel crunching under my boots, and looked up at the stars. My hands were shaking. From the cold, maybe. From something else, probably. I didn't cry. That's the part people never believe when I tell them this story. I didn't cry. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, breath rising like smoke, wondering when exactly I'd become invisible to the people I loved most. Inside, I heard the door open. My son's voice followed. "Dad, you okay?" I didn't turn around. You knew I was standing there. He didn't say anything. I heard everything I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Tired. "She thinks I'm a burden." "Dad, she didn't mean it like that. You didn't defend me." More silence. Then a sigh. "It's complicated." "No," I said, finally turning to face him. "It's not." He looked older than I remembered. Lines around his eyes, worry in his jaw. But he was still the boy I'd taught to ride a bike. Still the teenager who cried when his dog died. I searched his face for some flicker of that boy, but all I saw was a man too tired to fight for me. "I'm going to bed," I said. I walked past him and back into the house. The warmth hit me again, not comforting, just artificial. I climbed the stairs slowly like someone twice my age. In the guest room, I shut the door behind me, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo on the nightstand, the one of my wife holding James as a baby, both of them laughing at something I must have said behind the camera. I placed my hand on the frame, whispered her name. "You were right. You always said they'd forget." I turned out the light and lay down fully clothed. I didn't sleep. The thing about silence is it starts small, a missed goodnight, a forgotten thank you. Then it grows teeth. I didn't notice it at first. After my wife died, everything was quiet, so I thought I was just hearing the echo of her absence. But in hindsight, the silence had shape. It had weight. It was intentional. When James asked me to move in, he made it sound like a gift. "We don't want you alone in that house, Dad. You shouldn't be alone." His voice cracked when he said it. I still remember. I packed up my life in 5 cardboard boxes and left the home I'd lived in for 38 years. I gave it to a young couple, sold it below market because they were expecting their first baby. Felt good. Felt right. I moved into the guest room and told myself this was how family took care of each other. At first, it felt like healing. My granddaughter was still little then, with curls like her grandmother's, and a laugh that could make me believe in God. She used to crawl into my lap with her bedtime books and fall asleep halfway through the first page. My daughter-in-law was kind to me in those early days. She made me tea. She bought almond milk because the regular kind upset my stomach. I watched them grow into parenthood. The exhaustion, the joy, the way they'd look at each other like they'd been let in on a secret the rest of the world didn't know. I was proud of them. That's the part I don't say out loud often. I was proud. I started watching the baby during the day so they could save on daycare. That was never questioned, I just did it. Diaper bags, bottles, stroller walks. Sometimes I'd push the stroller past my old street just to look at the house. The new owners put up one of those modern mailboxes. The porch swing was gone. I never went past the driveway. I made dinner most nights. I liked cooking. My wife and I used to trade off. She made the casseroles, I made the meats. I kept her recipes in a tin box she labeled, "Don't you dare lose these." My daughter-in-law always said she loved her brisket. "No one makes it like you, Mr. Weston." Back then, she still called me that. I didn't mind. Time passed. Seasons changed. The baby grew. I tried not to notice the shift, how they stopped waiting for me to sit down before eating, how sometimes I'd come downstairs and the whole family would already be out at brunch. "Oh, sorry, Dad, we figured you'd be tired, and I was most days. But I would have liked the invite." I started paying for groceries. They didn't ask, but I saw the strain in their faces when rent came due. I offered to cover the utility bills too. James resisted at first, but eventually stopped protesting. "Thanks, Dad," he said, looking at his phone. "Appreciate it." That was it. No eye contact. No warmth. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I wanted to help. Then came the job loss. James got laid off from his tech firm during the restructuring. My daughter-in-law picked up more hours at the hospital, which left me taking care of my granddaughter full-time. I was 72. My knees weren't what they used to be, but I kept up because that's what you do. You show up. Even if no one sees you. I offered money from my retirement account to help them stay afloat, just until things stabilize. James resisted, but not for long. He always hated asking for help. I gave him the same speech my father gave me. What I have is yours. Always. I meant it. I still do, but there's something about generosity. If you offer it long enough without reciprocation, it starts to rot. Not because you want anything back, but because one day you realize you've been giving pieces of yourself away and no one even noticed the missing parts. The little things started to pile up. My granddaughter stopped coming into my room to read. She'd knock, peek in, then say, "Mom says you're probably tired." One night I heard her ask, "Why does Papa live here?" And her mother's voice, flat, practical, replied, "Because he has nowhere else." Nowhere else. That stayed with me. I thought about the house I sold, the one with the porch swing, the apple tree out back, the squeaky floorboard outside the bathroom. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I'd built the shelves in the living room with my own hands, planted every rosebush myself. My wife used to hum while watering them. When she died, I buried her ashes beneath the white one. Nowhere else. I stopped eating dinner with them after that, started taking my plate upstairs. They didn't ask why. My granddaughter stopped calling me Papa. She called me Grandpa like I was a school teacher or a substitute. Once she slipped and called me him, as in, "Is he coming with us?" That one stung. I didn't say anything, just nodded and went back to doing the dishes. The dishwasher broke that week. I fixed it. No one said thank you. At night, I started dreaming of my wife again. In the dreams, she didn't say much, just looked at me like she did when she was worried, one hand on her hip, eyes soft, mouth tight. I'd wake up to the sound of someone laughing downstairs or music blaring through the walls. My room didn't feel like a guest room anymore. It felt like storage. One afternoon, I found a box on my bed. Inside were my old books, some slippers, and a card. "We're doing a little organizing. Let us know if you want to keep these." It felt like a warning. I kept my mouth shut, told myself not to overreact. Maybe they really were just organizing. Maybe they didn't realize how it looked. But deep down I knew. I wasn't part of the future here. I was just furniture. A piece of history taking up space in a house built for their present. So I stopped talking as much. Started disappearing in small ways. Left the room when conversations got personal. Turned off the lights when no one was home. I tried to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. It worked. They forgot I was listening. They forgot I still felt things. Until Christmas Eve, when I heard the truth come out like venom, and for the first time in years, I understood I hadn't been part of a family. I had been tolerated. That night, I folded my clothes into a suitcase and placed it quietly in the closet. I didn't know where I'd go yet, but I knew this wasn't home anymore. I didn't leave right away. That might have seemed dramatic, like I was storming out demanding a grand apology that would never come. But I wasn't looking for that. I just needed time. Space to figure out what I still had left that was mine. So I stayed for a few more weeks, like a shadow that had nowhere else to fall. The days passed quietly, but not kindly. The house was colder somehow, though the thermostat never changed. My granddaughter stopped knocking altogether. Her laughter sounded distant, like it belonged to another family in another house. I'd hear them talk about summer plans, beaches, flights, amusement parks. No one asked if I'd be joining. I didn't ask either. One morning I came downstairs to find them all sitting at the kitchen island eating breakfast sandwiches from that place on Birch Street. I loved those. They didn't order one for me. My son glanced up halfway through a bite and said, "Hey, Dad, there's cereal in the pantry." I nodded, took a glass of water back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the suitcase still tucked in the closet. I hadn't opened it again since Christmas Eve. The fabric was already gathering dust. So was I. It was around that time the silences started to hurt more than the words ever did. Not because they were louder, but because they meant I no longer existed in the space where I used to belong. I spent hours walking around the neighborhood, hands in pockets, eyes to the ground. It was a quiet suburb, the kind where everyone waves, but no one really talks. I liked the man 3 doors down. He always nodded when he passed. Never asked questions, just nodded like he saw something in me he recognized. I found a bench at the park nearby and made a habit of sitting there every afternoon. There were ducks on the pond and a trail lined with maples, their leaves beginning to turn brittle. I liked the sound of wind through the dry branches. It sounded like pages turning, like maybe I still had chapters left. Back at the house, the air felt different. My daughter-in-law had started moving things. Subtle at first, the photo albums stored in the hall closet replaced with board games. A blanket my wife had crocheted taken off the back of the couch and folded neatly into a bin labeled seasonal. Her handwriting was sharp, clean, impersonal. One night I passed by the living room and saw her erasing our shared calendar. She wiped off my dentist appointment and replaced it with Zoe ballet recital. I understood. Life had to move on, but it didn't have to erase me in the process. James barely spoke to me anymore. He was always tired, always busy. When we did talk, it was surface-level weather traffic, occasional updates about bills. He never asked how I was feeling. He hadn't since the day my wife died. I started rereading old journals. My wife used to write letters to herself, little notes she'd leave between the pages of cookbooks or taped inside the medicine cabinet. I found one inside her recipe tin. The ink had faded, but I could still read it. If they ever forget who you are, don't forget yourself. You are not disposable. You are not invisible. Remember your hands, what they've built. Remember your heart, what it has carried. I read it 3 times, then I folded it into my wallet. There was a moment 2 nights later that should have been small. My granddaughter was crying in the next room. I heard her call for me, Papa. Not Grandpa. Papa. I was already halfway out of bed when her mother's voice cut through the wall. No, sweetie, not tonight. Let's let Papa sleep. It was gentle, almost kind, but it shut the door. I stood in the hallway anyway, just outside the sliver of her open door. I could see the outline of her nightlight casting stars on the ceiling. She was curled up, fists tight under her cheeks. Her mother sat beside her, brushing her hair back softly, and I stood there still, not moving, not breathing, just watching a scene I was no longer allowed to enter. The next morning, I made a decision. It didn't come with fire or fury. It came like morning fog, quiet, inevitable. I opened the suitcase, refolded the clothes, and made a list of the few things I'd need. I didn't tell them. I started looking for places not in the same town but nearby, somewhere with trees, somewhere I wouldn't be recognized as James Weston's dad, but just as me. A man. A person. Not a burden. I called a woman named Carla about a studio apartment over near Lake Glen. She said it was small but had a good view of the water. I told her I didn't need much. Just a place where I could cook my own food, play my music, maybe plant a few flowers on a balcony. She said she'd hold it for me if I could come by next week. I thanked her and circled the date on a notepad. That night at dinner, I asked my son, "Do you remember when we built the swing set together?" He looked up surprised. "The one in the old backyard." "Yeah." He nodded, chewing slowly. "Sure. Took us 2 days." "It took us 4, I said. "But you kept telling your mom it was 2 so you'd look more impressive." He smiled faintly, a ghost of something real. "I miss her," I said. He didn't respond. I wanted to reach across the table. I wanted to say, "You're losing me too and you don't even see it." But I didn't, because I think deep down he already knew, and he'd made peace with it. So I finished my dinner, washed my plate, went to bed early, and when I lay down, I didn't stare at the ceiling. I closed my eyes and pictured the lake, the sound of birds, the hum of solitude that might finally be mine. I whispered goodnight to my wife as I did every night, but this time I added something new. "I'm almost out," I said. "Just a little longer." The school fundraiser was on a Thursday evening. Cold air, sharp enough to bite through my coat, clung to every breath as I walked from the parking lot to the gymnasium doors. I had baked 2 pies the night before, 1 apple, 1 pecan, using my wife's old recipes, the ones that always made the house smell like November. I balanced them carefully in a cardboard carrier and tried to shake the nerves out of my hands. I wasn't sure why I felt so anxious. Maybe I wanted it to feel like something again, like I mattered. I saw my granddaughter's name printed in block letters on a construction paper banner near the entrance, Zoe Weston, 1st grade. Underneath, glitter clung in clumps to uneven letters. I smiled. That glitter always ended up in the carpet. The school buzzed with activity parents chatting in tight circles, kids chasing each other between booths, folding tables covered in wrapping paper and plastic utensils. A teacher with a clipboard asked if I was dropping off a pie for the auction. I handed over the box, careful not to show the tremble in my fingers. "Weston," I said. "Zoe's grandfather." She nodded politely and placed a sticker on the box. "Thank you, sir." I wandered toward the gym where the stage had been decorated with paper snowflakes and hand-drawn reindeer. I spotted James first, tall and stiff in a wrinkled button-down. My daughter-in-law stood beside him in a red coat, fussing with her phone. I walked up, already smiling. She looked up and froze. "Dad," James said, startled. "Hi," I said, trying not to feel small. "Thought I'd surprise you. Didn't want to miss her performance." She stepped in front of James, hands gripping her purse strap. "Oh, James, didn't you tell him?" His face tightened. "I didn't think he'd come." She sighed, visibly flustered. "We only got 2 tickets, Mr. Weston. I'm sorry they were limited. We tried to get more, but..." She looked around like hoping someone would step in and rescue her. "It's just these things are crowded, and honestly, it's not a good look you showing up to things like this." I blinked. "A good look?" She put a hand to her temple. I didn't mean it like that. You know how these events are. The kids talk and people ask questions, and we're already trying to keep a low profile with the job stuff and money stuff, and James stepped forward. Dad, maybe you can come to the next one. This one's just tight. I looked at him, really looked, and I realized for the first time that he wasn't uncomfortable because I was excluded. He was relieved. That's what shattered me. I nodded. Of course. I understand. I turned around and walked back through the parking lot. The pies were already inside. I didn't care. Let someone else win them. Let someone else taste something sweet for a night. When I got home, I sat in the kitchen alone. The house was silent. I opened my phone out of habit, not even sure what I was looking for. I scrolled through my daughter-in-law's Facebook page. Photos from the event had already gone up. Zoe on stage, arms wide smiling, her parents beaming in the front row, group pictures with classmates and teachers, all posted within the hour. I kept scrolling. Then I saw it. A group shot in front of the bake sale table. My granddaughter, my son, my daughter-in-law, and me in the far corner, slightly blurred, holding the pie box, smiling faintly. Except I wasn't there. They'd cropped me out. It was obvious, the edge of my sleeve still visible, awkwardly cut at the side of the frame. I sat there, phone in hand, watching the little blinking dots of comments come in. She's so cute. Such a beautiful family. Wish we'd been there. My daughter-in-law liked every comment. That night I printed the photo. Not the cropped one, the original I'd managed to save from the school's online gallery. I printed it on regular paper in black and white and pinned it to the inside of my suitcase. I wanted to remember. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. I wanted to remember what it looked like to be erased. I didn't bring it up. There was nothing left to bring up. No words that would change what had already been said in whispers, in exclusions, in careful edits. The next morning, my granddaughter passed me in the hallway, still in pajamas. "Did you see me dance?" she asked, beaming. I paused. "I did." She tilted her head. "You were there." "I was." "Oh," she said, blinking, then ran down the stairs without another word. The space between us had become normal to her. That scared me more than anything else. That weekend, I got a call from Carla. The studio was ready for viewing. I told her I'd be there Tuesday. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. But I started to pack. Carefully, slowly, one item at a time. Not like a man escaping, but like a man reclaiming what was his. Books, sweaters, my wife's music box. A framed photo of our wedding day, her lipstick faintly smudged on the edge of his collar. I left the calendar untouched. The fridge magnets, the stack of my unpaid receipts in the drawer, no one looked in. I kept quiet. They made it easy. I woke early on Christmas Eve. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no cartoons from the den, no holiday music humming in the kitchen. Just the low groan of the furnace kicking on and the brittle creak of floorboards as I moved from my bed to the window. Frost laced the glass. The yard was pale with morning, every blade of grass encased in ice. I watched the sun rise over the neighbor's fence while nursing a mug of weak coffee. It tasted like paper. I'd planned to leave after breakfast. A quiet exit. A note on the table, maybe. But then I saw my granddaughter padding down the hallway, dragging her red fleece blanket behind her, and I froze. She looked so small, messy curls, one sock half off, and suddenly I couldn't do it. Not yet. Not like that. I told myself one more day. I set the table again as I always did, placing the napkins in little fans just as my wife had. The same china, the same centerpiece. A ritual I kept because it made me feel like a part of something. James came downstairs around 10, rubbing his face with one hand and balancing his phone in the other. "You don't have to do that, Dad. We were just going to eat buffet style." I paused. "I like it this way." He hesitated, then shrugged and walked off. My daughter-in-law didn't speak to me all morning. We moved around the kitchen like strangers, pretending to be civilized, brief glances, neutral tones, instructions passed like paperwork. By 4, the tree was lit, presents stacked in uneven piles. Zoe wore a new green dress with tiny red bows stitched into the sleeves. She twirled for me once, then skipped away to show someone else. I sat in the corner watching everything I had once belonged to pass me by. Dinner began the way they always did. Small talk, forced smiles, everyone pretending the tension wasn't seeping into the stuffing. I passed dishes. No one met my eyes. My seat felt colder than the others. Halfway through the meal, Zoe looked up from her plate and said, "Why does Papa always sit way over there?" The table went still. My daughter-in-law let out a tight little laugh. "Because that's where Papa likes to sit." I swallowed. My knife hovered over the ham, unmoving. Zoe tilted her head. "Is he coming on the trip with us?" "What trip?" I asked. James looked up sharply, then down again. Her mother answered before he could. "We're doing a short trip next week. Just us. Somewhere warm." "I see," I said quietly. Zoe didn't. "He could come too." This time the silence didn't stretch, it snapped. Her mother leaned in, smiling just enough to make it worse. "Sweetheart, remember what we talked about. Sometimes grown-ups need time with just their family." Zoe blinked, confused. "He is family." And then it happened. My daughter-in-law looked straight at me, her smile gone. "He's a burden to this family, Zoe. You don't understand now, but someday you will." The room fell into a vacuum, every sound gone, every motion frozen. James didn't correct her, didn't flinch, didn't defend me. I looked at him not to plead, but to confirm, to see with my own eyes what I already knew. He stared down at his plate. That was the last moment I sat in that chair. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, my breath shallow. No one moved. I placed my napkin on the table and took one long look around. My granddaughter was staring at me, eyes wide and uncertain. I wanted to walk to her, to hug her, to tell her she wasn't the reason, but I didn't, because she'd forget. They would make sure of it. I cleared my throat. Not loud, just enough. "I heard what you said," I said, looking at my daughter-in-law. My voice didn't shake. "I've heard a lot of things lately." She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. "I won't argue. I'm not here to change your mind. I just want to be clear. I loved this family. I gave everything I had to it. Time, money, my home, my hands. I did it gladly. I never asked for a return, but I will not apologize for existing." James still wouldn't look at me. "I know you want to forget me. I know I make things complicated, but I won't stay where I'm unwanted. I won't teach my granddaughter that love means disappearing." I turned to Zoe, then just briefly. "You were never the burden." Then I walked upstairs, packed my final things. By the time I came down, they were in the kitchen whispering. I didn't interrupt. I left my key on the table. It had my name on it, still D. Weston in fading silver. I opened the front door. It was snowing lightly now, just a dusting. I stepped out and pulled the door shut behind me. No one followed. No one stopped me. And that silence, for once, was mine. The apartment was smaller than I imagined, but there was a strange kind of comfort in its plainness. White walls. One window facing a frozen lake. A creaky radiator that clicked in the early mornings. I moved in the day after Christmas hauling boxes with an old handcart I borrowed from the building manager, Carla. She met me at the door with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Don't worry," she said, glancing at my stiff knees. "This place has good bones." I didn't know what that meant, but I liked the way she said it, like something could be old and worn and still worthy of being kept. There were no garlands, no holiday leftovers, no evidence that Christmas had ever happened. I was grateful for that. The first night I sat on the edge of the twin bed and looked around the empty room. The light outside flickered from a street lamp that made the walls glow gold. I unpacked slowly, one plate, one mug, one photo frame. I placed the picture of my wife by the window. Her smile faced the lake. "I made it," I whispered. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like something that had been straining underwater for too long had finally broken the surface. Not swimming yet. Just breathing. The days passed in quiet routines. I walked to the local grocery store where the clerk already recognized me by week 2. I bought only what I could carry: eggs, bread, a single apple. I started cooking again, not for anyone else, just for myself. I made her meatloaf recipe on a Tuesday, and it didn't taste right, but it was close enough to make me smile. I found a watercolor class at the community center. I hadn't painted since high school. My hands were shaky, my brushwork clumsy, but the instructor never corrected me. She just said, "Nice composition," and kept walking. That was enough. The lake thawed by late January. Geese returned loud and aimless, dragging their shadows across the icy water. I sat on a bench near the edge and let the cold wind slice through my jacket. I liked the sting. It reminded me I was still here. My phone didn't ring. Not once. At first, I checked it every morning, then once a week, then only when I needed directions or groceries. One afternoon, I caught myself holding it for no reason, just staring at the black screen. I put it in a drawer after that and didn't take it out again. I wrote letters to myself. Just a few lines every morning, not to be profound. Just to remember. What did you hear today? What did you smell? What made you pause? On January 14th, I wrote, "A woman on the corner had a dog that looked like Rusty. Remember how he used to wait by the garage when you came home? Remember how James cried when he died? That memory stayed with me the whole day. I started sleeping better. No footsteps overhead. No whispered arguments behind thin walls. No guilt pressing into my spine like a weight I couldn't shake. I found an old upright piano in a thrift store. The keys were yellowed, the lower F stuck, but when I pressed them, the notes came back like breath. I didn't have it delivered. I went back every few days and played for 10 minutes, then left. It was enough. One of the volunteers at the store asked if I was a teacher. No, I said, just someone who remembers. She didn't press. There was freedom in that too. In February, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Just a simple white envelope with my name, Papa, written in pencil. Inside was a drawing. Crayon figures. A tall man in a red coat standing beside a girl with curly hair. They were holding hands. Underneath, "I miss you. Love, Zoe." That was the day I cried. Not loud, not long, just one long breath that turned into a sob that folded back into silence. I didn't call. I didn't write back. Not because I didn't want to, but because that letter wasn't permission, it was memory. It was a child holding on to a piece of someone the world around her had tried to erase. And I wanted her to keep that piece intact, untainted by adult words or disappointments. Maybe someday when she's older, she'll come looking for me. Maybe she won't. I've stopped needing the answer. One morning in March, Carla knocked on my door holding a mug of coffee and a newspaper. "Thought you might want company," she said. We sat at the little table near the window. The lake shimmered. Her voice was soft, warm. She didn't ask about my family. I didn't offer. That night I realized something no one knew who I used to be here. Not a father, not a burden, just a man with paint on his hands and too many sweaters, and that anonymity was a gift. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because I finally got to choose who I was becoming. Spring arrived slowly, like someone unsure of their welcome. The snow melted in reluctant patches, and the trees outside my window began to wake in hushed bursts of green. It was during one of those early warm afternoons that I walked to the park and realized I hadn't thought about their house in almost a week. The air was soft that day. The sky a muted blue. I sat on my usual bench, the one facing the lake, and watched a father teach his daughter to skip stones. She couldn't have been more than 7, same age as Zoe. I didn't feel bitterness, just an ache. Familiar now, manageable. The kind that settles into your ribs and learns how to breathe with you. When I got back to the apartment, there was a letter taped to my door. Not a card. Not a package. A letter. The handwriting was James's. I stood there for a full minute, key in hand, before I peeled it off and walked inside. I didn't sit. I didn't put down my coat. I opened the letter with the same care you might give to something fragile and long buried. It wasn't long. "Dad, I know we haven't talked. I know it's my fault. I haven't known what to say. I keep thinking about Christmas, about what I let happen. Zoe misses you. She asks about you a lot. She drew you another picture last week. I didn't know if I should send it. I guess I'm writing to ask, can we talk? Not as father and son, just as two people who have some things to say. No pressure. If you don't want to, I'll understand. James." I set the letter down, stared at it, then walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stood at the sink. The apartment was quiet. The lake just beyond the window reflected the fading afternoon light. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow, because the voice in my head said exactly what I didn't want to hear. Too late. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't pride. It was knowing that some bridges don't burn, they just crumble, one brick at a time. I didn't call. I didn't write back. Not right away. Instead, I took the letter and tucked it beside Zoe's drawing in the drawer of my nightstand. Side by side, 2 pieces of something fractured. The next morning, I went to the piano, played for 30 minutes. A woman passing by asked if I taught lessons. "No," I said, "just remembering old songs." She smiled. "Well, it's nice to hear someone playing." And it struck me how long it had been since someone said nice to hear and meant it. Not necessary, not obligatory, nice. That night I dreamed of my wife again. She stood in the doorway of the old house, her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips, like it always did when she was holding back "I told you so's." I stood on the lawn. She didn't say anything, just nodded once, as if to say, "You're getting there." I woke up smiling. A few days later, Carla invited me to dinner. She made pasta too much garlic, not enough salt, and we laughed about our childhoods, about what music used to mean, about the strange weight of being seen as someone's dad for so long that you forget who you were before. When I told her about the watercolor class, she asked if she could see my work. I showed her the lake I'd painted, rough and clumsy and oddly beautiful. She held it like it mattered. "You ever think about teaching?" she asked. "No. Maybe you should." The thought stayed with me. Not as a possibility, as an invitation. The next morning, I bought a new set of brushes, a small canvas, a folding easel that could fit in the corner of the room, and I painted the bench, the one near the lake. No people, just the bench. Still. Waiting. That same week, I passed the piano and found a child pressing random keys, her mother apologizing in a rush. I smiled, shook my head. "It's okay," I said. "You just might have a musician on your hands." The little girl beamed, and I felt something then, not redemption, not revenge, just presence. I walked home that night and took the letter out again. Read it once, then wrote one of my own. "James, I received your letter. I'm not sure what to say. I've said most of what I needed to. Not with words, maybe, but in the silence I left behind. I miss Zoe. Of course I do. And I remember everything. Every Saturday. Every bedtime book. Every moment you let her forget me. I'm not angry. I'm just gone. That doesn't mean we can't talk someday, but for now I think I need to be just me. Thank you for writing. That took something. Take care of your daughter. Tell her I kept her drawing. Dad." I didn't mail it. Not yet, but I folded it and placed it next to his. Because some bridges can't be rebuilt, but sometimes they become memorials. And that's enough. The painting sat in the corner for 3 days before I dared to sign it. Just my initials, DW, scratched softly into the bottom right corner with the edge of a brush handle. It felt strange, final. Not because the painting was good, it wasn't, but because it was mine. It didn't belong to a family dinner or a living room wall where people would forget to notice it. It didn't exist for praise or permission. It just existed. Like me. On the 4th morning, Carla invited me to an artist's open studio down the block. I said no, then changed my mind. It was held in a small upstairs loft, the windows streaked with light from an overcast sky. There were a dozen easels, abstracts, landscapes, a portrait of someone's dog with eyes so human I had to look away. People mingled. No one asked about family. No one asked what I used to do or who I used to belong to. I liked that. At one point, someone pointed to the little lake painting I'd brought along, a print I'd made of the original, and asked, "Where is that?" I told them it was just outside my window. Funny, they said it looks lonelier than that. I didn't respond. I just nodded. Because they weren't wrong. The lake had become a mirror. Not the kind that showed your face, the kind that showed your absence. Every ripple reminded me of everything I'd poured myself into, and everything that had drained away without a trace. Still, I kept painting. I woke early, took long walks, brewed coffee with too much cream. I stopped checking the mailbox. I stopped looking for signs that I still mattered to people who had already moved on. That kind of waiting was a tether, and I was done being tied to anything I didn't choose. But sometimes, without meaning to, I'd still look at the door around dusk. Out of habit, as if a small figure might appear, as if Zoe might knock. It never happened. I saw James's name pop up on my phone in early April. Just once. A missed call, no message. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. I didn't call back. I told myself I needed more time. What I didn't say, what I couldn't admit yet, was that maybe I didn't need the door reopened. Maybe I needed it closed for good. That's a harder kind of grief. The kind that doesn't roar, it lingers. Muted, domestic, like background noise you can't quite place but always feel. Carla noticed I'd been quieter. "You okay?" she asked one morning, handing me a muffin wrapped in a napkin. "Yeah," I said. "You sure?" I nodded. She didn't push. Instead, she invited me to a local music night at the community center. I hadn't played in front of anyone in decades, but something in me, the same ache that wouldn't quite go away, wanted to try. I brought a simple piece, a soft waltz my wife used to hum while cooking. I don't even know its name. I just remember her voice off-key, but always sure of itself. I played it slow, deliberate, letting each note stretch and fall like it knew where it was going, even if I didn't. When I finished, the applause was polite, but Carla stood up and clapped longer than anyone else. It wasn't pride I felt. It was recognition. And in that room for just a moment, I wasn't a burden. I wasn't forgotten. I was just a man who made something beautiful and shared it with strangers. That night I walked back to the apartment under a sky so wide it felt like I could finally breathe. I lit a small candle, set it beside the photo of my wife, and whispered, "Did you hear that I played it like you used to sing it?" I imagined her nodding, approving, maybe even swaying. Grief is strange. It makes you talk to people who are gone more than you ever talked to them when they were alive. And sometimes you hear answers. Not in words, but in memory. In the way the wind hits the window. In the way the candle flickers when no one's near. The next morning I sat down and painted again. Not the lake, not the bench. This time it was the porch of my old house. The one James grew up in, the swing, the rose bush, the shadow of a boy with a toy truck in his hands, and standing just behind him, a man slightly hunched, holding a cup of coffee, watching. Not trying to guide, not trying to be seen, just present. I didn't need anyone to hang it up. I didn't need to ask if it was good. I leaned it against the wall and let it be. By May, I had 3 finished paintings and half a dozen sketches. Carla came over with lemonade one afternoon and asked what I was going to do with them. "Keep them," I said. "Why not show them?" I thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Because I don't want to give them away." She smiled. "That's a good reason." And I realized for the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone anything. Not my time, not my story, not even my forgiveness. I could keep my memories, keep my art, keep my silence. Not out of spite, out of choice. By June, the apartment felt lived in. Not cluttered, but honest. A pair of shoes by the door, a stack of library books on the nightstand, paint-stained rags hanging by the sink, the scent of coffee baked into the floorboards. Some days I still woke before dawn like I had back at their house. Habit. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, half expecting to hear footsteps overhead, the hum of the dishwasher, the hollow sound of someone avoiding me. But it was quiet here, not the kind of quiet that isolates, the kind that softens. I'd learned the rhythm of my solitude, the sound of the mail slipping through the slot, the neighbor's door slamming at 7:12 every morning, the way birds congregated on the fire escape just before it rained. It's strange how quickly a life can rebuild itself in fragments, not through miracles, not even through forgiveness, just repetition. Small motions that add up to something steady. One morning, I found a letter in the mailbox. No name on the return, just a child's handwriting on the front. I opened it carefully, already knowing. Inside, another drawing. This time it was me holding hands with Zoe again, but we were on a boat, and she'd drawn a sun with long eyelashes and a smiling face. On the back, written in block letters, "Do you still remember me? I still remember you." No signature, no address, just that. I sat down on the stoop with the letter in my lap and stared at the street. I thought about calling James, about asking why she was still drawing me if I was being edited out of everything else, about what they were telling her, if anything. But I didn't call. Instead, I picked up a pencil and started sketching her face from memory, the shape of her eyes, the dimple in her left cheek when she smiled, the way she always tilted her head just slightly when she was trying to understand something bigger than herself. It took 3 tries before I got it close. I taped it to the fridge and stood back. She was still there, alive in a way no photograph could capture. Not because she was smiling, but because I remembered her, as she remembered me, unfinished but real. That night I walked by the lake and past a small family setting up a picnic. A man knelt beside his daughter, helping her open a juice box. His wife laughed and laid out a blanket. It should have hurt, that tableau of wholeness, but it didn't. Because I could finally see it for what it was, theirs. Not mine. Not anymore. And mine didn't have to look like that to matter. I sat on the same bench I always did and closed my eyes. The wind brushed past. A woman walking her dog stopped nearby and asked, "You mind if I sit?" I shook my head. We sat in silence for a long while. Then she said, "You look like someone who used to belong to something." I turned and met her eyes. I did. She nodded like she understood. "Did it leave you? Or did you leave it?" "Both," I said. We didn't speak after that. She got up, said goodbye, and walked on. But her words stayed with me. I went home and pulled out my old journals, the ones I hadn't opened in months. I flipped through the pages, letters to my wife, notes about the weather, grocery lists turned into small poems, and then I found one entry dated the week after I moved in. If they remember me only as the man who disappeared, so be it. There is more dignity in absence than in pretending I was ever welcome. I closed the book and set it down. It was true then, but now? I wasn't so sure. I didn't want to disappear. I just wanted to belong to myself again. I started writing again. Not journals. Letters. To Zoe. Letters I never intended to send. Each one began the same way. "You won't remember most of this, but I do. I wrote about the time she wore her shoes on the wrong feet and insisted that was how astronauts did it. About the morning she spilled juice all over my crossword and said, 'Oops, now it's a color puzzle.' about how she cried when her fish died and made me hold a spoonful of water like it was a burial. I wrote until my hand ached. Then I folded the letters and placed them in a shoebox, labeled it in case you ever ask, because I knew she might. One day, or she might not, but either way, the truth would be waiting. Not bitter, not broken, just honest. One afternoon, I played piano in the thrift store again. A boy with Down syndrome sat near me swinging his feet and humming along. When I finished, he clapped and said, "Play the sad one again." I did. Twice. The woman at the counter asked if I wanted to play during their evening hours. Just background music. Nothing formal. I said yes. That night I walked home under a gray sky that never quite rained. I passed the florist shop and bought a single white rose. When I got back, I placed it in a glass on the windowsill right next to my wife's photo. "I'm still here," I told her, "and I'm not done yet." She didn't answer, but the candle beside her flickered once, as if she heard. July came with its heat and thunderstorms, the kind that crack the sky open and make you feel small and electric all at once. I loved it. I left the windows open during the storms, let the air roll through the apartment like a baptism. It smelled like wet earth and metal and something ancient I couldn't name. That month I painted almost every day. Nothing ambitious. A bowl of fruit. My coffee cup. A crack in the sidewalk I passed on my walks. I didn't think about meaning. I didn't reach for messages. I just painted what I saw. Carla told me there was a small gallery down the block accepting community pieces for a weekend exhibit. I shrugged it off at first, but she brought it up again gently. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. "Just show them what your world looks like." I chose the painting of the porch, the one with James as a boy and the man behind him with the coffee. I dropped it off with no expectations. The day of the exhibit, I stood in the back and watched strangers walk past it. Most didn't stop. Some glanced. A few paused longer. One man with a long beard and tired eyes asked me, "Is that your son?" I nodded. He looked at it for a long time. "I had one too. Lost him to addiction. This feels like waiting for them to come back." I didn't say anything, just nodded. He patted my shoulder and walked away. I stood there for a while after that, thinking about how many fathers were walking around with ghosts still stitched into their shadows. On the way home, I passed a toy store. The front window had a set of building blocks arranged to spell out family. One of the letters was crooked. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Back at the apartment, I found a voicemail on my phone. "The first in months." It was James. His voice sounded tired, older, slower than I remembered. "Hey, Dad, I know it's been a while. So he started asking about you again. She's writing letters, but I don't think she knows where to send them anymore. I guess I'm calling to say I don't expect anything. But if you ever wanted to talk or come by even for a little while, we'd make space. I know I should have done more. I was scared of what it meant to need you and fail you at the same time. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I'd like to try if you'd let me." He paused. "She still draws you. Every week. Thought you should know." The message ended. I didn't press replay. I sat on the couch and listened to the quiet. Not waiting. Not deciding. Just listening. My hand found the edge of the couch cushion, the worn fabric, the frayed thread from when I first moved in. I ran my finger along the seam like it might hold an answer. I thought about forgiveness. Not as an act of grace, but as release. For him. For me. I made tea, sat by the window, watched the rose wilt a little more under the heat. And then I wrote another letter. James, I got your message. I've thought about it. I won't come by. Not now. But I would meet you somewhere neutral. A coffee shop, maybe. Not to talk about the past. Not yet. But just to sit across from you. See who you are now. Maybe start from there, and if Zoe wants to keep sending drawings, tell her I have every single one she's sent. I even made a little gallery wall. She deserves to know she hasn't disappeared from me. Neither of you have. But I'm not stepping back into what I left. If we build something new, it has to be honest. No edits, no silence. I'll be at the cafe on Briar Hill this Saturday. Noon. I won't wait long. But I'll show up. I sealed it and walked to the corner mailbox before I could talk myself out of it. The sky was pink with heat. Cicadas buzzing in the distance. A group of kids chased each other across the sidewalk, their laughter shrill and endless. I stood there, fingers on the mailbox slot, then dropped the envelope inside. I didn't feel better, but I felt movement. That night I played the piano again, the sad one, but slower, not mournful, measured, like a heartbeat coming back into rhythm. I slept better, dreamed less, woke with more breath in my lungs. On Friday, I cleaned the kitchen, put on a clean shirt, pressed my slacks. Not for them, for me. I wanted to show up as someone who had survived, not someone looking to be rescued. Saturday arrived with a silver sky and air thick enough to press into your lungs. I walked to the cafe slowly, not from hesitation, but from something quieter, the need to feel every footstep, every breath. The cafe sat on the corner of Briar Hill and Ashwood, with chipped paint around the door frame and a chalkboard sign that read, "Fresh start. We've got coffee for that." I pushed the door open. The scent of dark roast and vanilla hit me first. A woman behind the counter nodded without asking for my order. I'd been here a few times before, quiet mornings, notebook open, pretending not to watch families stream in with strollers and scones. Today felt different, like I'd stepped into someone else's memory. I chose a table near the window. Noon. Right on time. I didn't expect him to be there. But he was. James stood at the far corner, awkward, unsure. He'd cut his hair shorter, dressed better than usual. Slacks a collared shirt with one sleeve rolled too high. His eyes scanned the room until they found mine. We didn't smile. We just looked. He approached like someone walking into fog, uncertain of what waited on the other side. "Hi," he said. "Sit," I replied, nodding to the chair across from me. He did. A silence hung between us, not heavy, but brittle. One wrong word might break it. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. I said I would. He looked down at his hands. "Thank you. For that." I waited. He glanced up, searching my face. I don't know what to say that doesn't sound like too little, too late. I folded my arms. "Then don't say it." He blinked, startled. "Then why are you here?" "To see if there's anything left," I said. "Of you. Of me. Of something we might recognize." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that. I'm not here for punishment, James. I'm not here for apologies either. You already gave that. I'm here because I remembered who I am, and I wanted to see if you remembered too." His throat moved as he swallowed. "I forgot. I'll admit that. I got lost." I looked out the window. I let myself be erased. It wasn't just you. He didn't speak. Didn't defend. A good sign. After a moment, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Zoe asked me to give this to you. I hesitated before taking it. Unfolded slowly. Another drawing. This time, it was a piano. Crayons scrawled across the page. A stick figure with gray hair sitting at the keys, a smaller one beside him dancing. At the bottom, I love your music. I miss your face. No name, just that. I placed the drawing on the table. She remembers everything I said. I know he replied, and I'm starting to. I met his eyes then, and for a flicker of a moment I saw the boy again, the one who built a swing set with crooked nails and muddy shoes, who clung to my pant leg at the zoo, who begged for one more story before bed. Then the flicker faded, and there sat a man older frayed at the edges, finally aware of his own undoing. I'm not moving back, I said. He nodded. I didn't expect you to. I don't want her to forget me. She hasn't. She won't. I nodded. We sat there for a while saying nothing, letting time stretch and soften between us. Then James reached into his wallet and pulled out a photo worn bent at the corners. It was of me and Zoe sitting on the old porch swing, her head on my shoulder, my hand in her hair. I keep this, he said, in case I need to remember what I ruined. I stared at it for a long time, then pushed it back toward him. Don't keep it as punishment. Keep it as reminder. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were wet. I didn't flinch. He folded the photo gently and returned it to his wallet. Would you come to her birthday? He asked, voice almost cracking. It's in August. No pressure. Just think about it. I will, I said. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal. He nodded and looked out the window. It's strange. I never noticed how many people walk by carrying things, boxes, bags, like they're moving their lives one piece at a time. Everyone's carrying something, I said. He laughed softly. Yeah, I guess I just didn't see yours. You weren't looking. He nodded. I'm trying now. We sat a while longer. The cafe grew louder laughter from a table nearby, a blender roaring behind the counter, someone dragging a chair across the floor. We stayed quiet. It wasn't uncomfortable, just new. Eventually I stood. Thank you for showing up, I said. He rose too. Thank you for letting me. We didn't hug, didn't shake hands, just looked. And in that look there was something soft, not forgiveness, but the shape of it. I walked back to my apartment alone. The street was bright with sunlight. The lake shimmered through the trees. A group of kids played near the fountain, their laughter rising in waves. I reached my door, unlocked it, and stepped inside, placed the new drawing on the wall next to the others, then sat at the piano and played. August bloomed thick and slow. Heat clung to everything, door handles, pillowcases, even the breath between thoughts. But in the shade of my little apartment there was peace. I left the windows open and let the days pass in golden stillness. Zoe's birthday was set for the second Saturday of the month. I didn't RSVP. I didn't call. I told myself that if I felt ready, I'd go. If I didn't, I'd stay. Simple as that. No promises made. No guilt collected. I spent the morning of the party like I did most Saturdays. Walked to the market, bought tomatoes and a fresh loaf of bread. I sat by the lake with my sketchbook and started drawing again, not Zoe this time, but a garden gate from memory. My wife used to dream of having one white painted flanked by lavender. We never built it. Life moved fast back then. Around 11, I found myself checking the time more than I meant to. I made tea, sat down, stood up. My hands wouldn't rest. By noon, I was showered and dressed slacks, a pressed shirt, the kind I hadn't worn since before I left. I put the drawing of the piano and Zoe into a manila envelope and sealed it without writing a name on the front. No card, no message. Just the image. The party was at the same park where she'd learned to ride her bike. James had mentioned it in the voicemail soft grass, a small pavilion balloons on the far end. I arrived just after 1. I didn't walk fast. I didn't expect anything. From the sidewalk, I saw the familiar curve of the hill, the bounce house pulsing with children's screams, the pastel paper plates fluttering under a canopy of trees. Zoe stood by the table wearing a pale yellow dress. Her curls had grown longer. In one hand, she held a slice of cake. In the other, a small toy piano, one of those battery-powered ones with rainbow keys. She pressed a few buttons. The melody sounded vaguely like the tune I always played for her. I almost turned around, almost convinced myself this was enough, to see her from a distance safe, growing unbroken. But then she looked up, and her eyes locked on mine. She didn't smile at first. She just stared. I lifted my hand small, slow, unsure. Then she dropped the cake and ran. She was faster than I remembered, arms swinging wild, shoes kicking up dust curls, bouncing like she hadn't skipped a beat in her knowing of me. She crashed into my waist, hugging tight. "Papa," she whispered. I bent to her, my hand on her back. "Hi, baby." She stepped back and looked up at me. "I thought you were gone." "I was," I said, "but not from here." I touched her chest gently. "Not ever from here." James approached quietly, his wife behind him, uncertain, guarded, but he nodded once. It was enough. I stayed for an hour, sat at the edge of a table with a melting paper cup of lemonade, watched Zoe open her gifts, laughed when she shouted, "This one's boring," at a book. She placed my envelope at the bottom of her pile, and later, when no one was watching, she opened it slowly and tucked the picture into her backpack. No words, just a small glance in my direction. That was her thank you. I left before the cake was finished. James walked me to the parking lot. "I don't know what this means," he said. "It doesn't have to mean anything yet." He nodded. "You look better?" "I am," I said, and I was. I walked home the long way past the library, the bakery, the thrift store where the piano waited. I didn't stop. Not that day. Back home, the apartment smelled of dried lavender. Carla had left a little bundle at my door with a note that said, "Thought of you." I placed it beside my wife's photo. Later that night, I sat by the window with a mug of tea. The street lamp buzzed. A soft breeze passed through the screen. I could hear someone upstairs playing an old Motown record. Laughter filtered in from an open window 2 buildings over. It was an ordinary night, but I felt something settle in me. Not finality, not triumph, just breath. Like the ending of a long note played well and true, like someone finishing a song, closing the lid and standing up, not to applause, but to stillness. To enough. The truth is, I still miss them. Not the people they became, the distance, the dismissal, the carefully avoided eye contact, but the echo of who they used to be when love was simple, and dinner always came with a chair pulled out just for me. I miss my wife's voice in the quiet, her hand on my shoulder when I doubted myself. I miss the version of James who thought I hung the moon before life and resentment and fatigue carved out something colder in him. But I don't miss the feeling of being erased. I don't miss folding myself smaller every year just to be allowed a corner of their world. Now I belong to my own world. I paint it. I play it. I wake up in it and choose who I let in. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of this chapter. Not that they apologized, not that I got anything back, but that I survived the leaving. That I stood in the wreckage, dusted off the silence, and said this will not be my ending. So if Zoe remembers me, not just now, but 10, 20 years from now, I hope it's as someone who walked away when staying would have meant disappearing completely. And if she ever finds those letters tucked in that shoebox under my bed, I hope she understands I never stopped loving her. I just finally started loving myself, too. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if this story moved you. Share your voice. It matters.